We're back. Anytime you hear that music, Chris, you know that it's time to enter the dojo. And look, I'm here once again, as always, with my good friend and co-host, Chris, the Devy Shifu. Chris, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing great, my man. We have a awesome episode lined up. We did a mock draft between the 2026 and 2027 classes with our Devy Dojo Substack writers, Ben and Josh. We did a little bit of a mock draft. I believe you had the first pick, I had the third pick, and then Josh and Ben were in between. So we're just going to dive into the differences between 2026 and 2027 because you've heard so much about 2026 not being as good of a class as 2027. And we just wanted to parse that out right now. We're getting really ramped up into draft season for 2026, and you're going to hear a lot of hype around a lot of these prospects. But it's good to step back a little bit and decide how good really is my 2026 pick versus maybe potentially trading for a 2027. And that's what we're doing right here tonight.
Yeah, you said it. You said it perfectly, Chris. Right? How many times have we heard that 2027 is like the gold standard, and 2026 by comparison is just pretty underwhelming. So, like Chris said, we're gonna test that idea the only way that really matters by drafting them head to head. So just to clarify, this is a 2-round combined mock with both classes eligible. We're going to cover rounds 1 and 2 here tonight because once we got into the board doing this mock draft with all of us, there were just too many names that we still like to just push through in one episode. So we'll finish it up with rounds 3 and 4 in next week's episode. So without further ado, Chris, man, let's just get right into it.
Absolutely. So first off was your pick, and you took Jeremiah Smith. Surprising, probably no one listening.
Yeah, I mean, since this guy came into college, as a freshman, he was the belle of the ball, right? He's the prize that everybody has been hoarding these 2027 picks in hopes to get. And of course, if you play Devy or C2C, maybe perhaps you got him early. And of course, that's the perks of playing in those leagues. But for my Dynasty listeners here, this is the guy that everybody wants. And I mean, look, realistically, Chris, I think that had he been eligible, he could have entered the draft last season and been a top 5 pick at worst. I mean, this dude's just incredible. I don't know what else to really say about him. The word generational is it's definitely overused, but he embodies what a generational talent is supposed to look like. He was an NFL ready-made prospect day one at a mere 18 years old, dominated as a young man, and he's just continued to do that. Now, the Buckeyes didn't win a national championship this year. Of course, they lost to Miami. But in that game versus Miami, Chris, I mean, he went off and showed his dominance. He 8 targets, 7 catches, 157 yards, and 1 touchdown. 3.93 yards per route run just in that game, and 3.44 yards per route run on the season. I mean, just shows how dominant he is. Over 1,200 yards again receiving this season, 12 touchdowns. To go ahead with his 15 last year, he's only a few hundred yards away from breaking the all-time receiving record in school history and the all-time touchdown record in school history. I mean, by September of 2026, by the end of September, Jeremiah Smith could be looking to break both of those records. It's just fascinating.
Which is fantastic. And it's almost like we're at the point of dominance burnout, right? Where you're just so used to him being so good that you almost forget about him. But that just speaks to us in the Devy world where how good he has been as a pick and how consistent he's been. Because we've seen very recently Ryan Williams, right, was our 102 in a lot of drafts, both in the Devy Dojo and a lot of other Devy podcasts. And just around the world, people thought Ryan Williams was the man. And Ryan Williams has not lived up to the hype. But Jeremiah Smith has not only lived up to the hype, he's done it with Carnell Tate next to him. He's done it with a new quarterback. He's really just shown us that he's bulletproof, basically. He's the 101 all around the board. There's a good reason to take him right now, as you did between both of these classes. He's the prince that was promised.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So number 102, who had that pick?
Ben took Jeremiyah Love, and he was our consensus 101 in our most recent mock draft. Jeremiyah Love for us is very much the number 1 pick in the 2026 draft because of both positional value and because of his overall talent. I think that no matter how much you parse it, you're going to see a lot of people talking about how great this guy is at playing the running back position. A lot of people are going to have him ranked above any of the wide receivers in the 2026 class, and for good reason. He's just dynamic. We've seen him in the backfield with Jadarian Price. We've seen him still dominate every time he touches the ball. He looks better than everyone else. It is a little bit of a shame that we haven't been able to see him in the college football playoff, but I'm not going to get too into that because, I think it's kind of funny that Notre Dame didn't make the playoff. But, it'd be nice to see him now as we're getting deeper into the weeds of the college football playoff here in January and late December. We would have liked to see more of him, but I'm also kind of happy that we didn't because he's going to the NFL. He's saving his body. We'll see him maybe a little bit in the combine, but I don't think he's going to test all the way. He's already kind of set himself in as a top 15 pick, if not top 10.
Yeah, I don't think he has anything left to prove. He's probably going to be one of those guys that doesn't test at the combine because, like you said, he's pretty much solidified as a top 15 pick in the NFL draft. He's certainly solidified as the rookie 101 in Dynasty drafts. And already looking at this board, Chris, you see 2027 off the board first and 2026. So 2026 101, according to this board here, is pretty comparable with the top end of those classes. So you love to see it. If you could get a dynamic running back with spike week potential like Jeremiyah Love, like a Devon Achane, backs of that nature, that's gold for your fantasy lineup. So I love it here. I have no real arguments. There might be some guys later, but like even in the next pick, possibly going forward, I could see going ahead. But right now, where we are today, I can't argue with the pick, and I like it. So let's roll on to the 103. This was your pick that you actually had, and that's Mr. Arch Manning, the other prince that was promised, right? Mobile Manning, right? He presents that name and the expectations that we have all been waiting. We've all been anticipating. We've been anxiously waiting to see this dude hit the field, and we finally got to see it this season as the full-time starter for Texas. And look, we've talked about it a lot on this show. We had concerns with his development under Coach Sarkisian because when he first came out, he didn't look ready. His footwork in the pocket was atrocious, which directly affected his accuracy. People were wondering if he was hurt. Is he any good? The whispers came out again of he didn't play the best high school competition. But down the stretch and really to end the season, you started to see him take that next step. And I think it was just simply the experience that he got on the field. And, I've talked about it. He's a little swaggy guy. He starts feeling himself when he makes a play. And I think early onset, he heard all the rumblings of people talking about him. Is he a bust? Is he this? Is he that? And I truly think that it affected his play. But like I said, to close the season, beating Texas A&M, beating Michigan in the bowl game, you started to see it all come together. And now, like, Texas is making moves in the transfer portal, potentially getting a wide receiver like Cam Coleman. It's really exciting to see this guy because he has that Konami upside, right? He hit 21.7 miles per hour against Michigan on a 60-yard touchdown run. Let that marinate.
Yeah, which is insane. I've been teasing writing an article about him on our Substack, and that will be coming this week. It's been a long process through the holidays for me writing this out, but I've been really diving into Arch Manning. And, when we started the season, he was the guy, right? Everybody wanted Arch Manning on their Devy rosters, their C2C rosters, whatever. You wanted to have a slice of him going into the NFL draft, no matter what that was. And we all kind of anticipated that he would go back for another year, and that is what's going to happen. But he's been so good the last couple weeks, especially, as you mentioned, in the Citrus Bowl against Michigan. He looked insanely dominant. And what I love about him the most, and I've talked about this before, is the rushing upside, which you don't see from every quarterback. But when we're talking about Dynasty, we're talking about playing fantasy football here. That's the whole point. You want a little bit of a rushing floor, and he's shown that his ability to run the ball is beyond that of a lot of guys currently in college football. He has a cerebral, pathways. He has the vision of a lot of running backs coming out of the pocket, very different than most quarterbacks who have lived their entire life just living in and out of the pocket, making the passes in front of them. He sees the field in two different ways, which is I'm going to either pass the ball or I'm going to run the ball. So they obviously designed some plays for him to run the ball, but a lot of times he's thinking, let's pass, let's get the right ball out. And if there's pressure collapsing upon him, he's got the potential to just break loose and make a first down with ease, which is what I love the most about him. When you get a little bit of running game behind a quarterback, that's going to be the difference in fantasy points in your week to week in dynasty football. And that's why I think he's a fantastic asset. It's not necessarily the name. The name, of course, holds a lot of value because he's got literal legends talking to him every day, every week, chirping in his ear. This is how you could get better at passing the ball. But Eli and Peyton are not running quarterbacks, right? None of them are going to call him up and say, you should have ran this ball. You should have did this. But he's got that natural talent to be a very adept, running quarterback in the modern game. On top of that, he's got that passing ability that we've seen. And I know that a lot of his wide receivers haven't really lived up. We talked about this on a previous episode where even Ryan Wingo was just not, even when he's open, he's dropping balls. So I think a lot of the downplay of Arch in the middle of the season, even towards the beginning of the season after he didn't start as hot as we thought, a lot of that comes from his wide receivers were not just getting open for him, or they were open, they were dropping passes. So his overall stats early in the year were not great. But the things he's shown us as he's gotten deeper into SEC play and as he's progressed through the season are showing that he's growing as a quarterback. And I've even heard that draft analysts or, NFL GMs, whatever you want to call it, are saying he would be the number one overall pick if he came out in this draft. And he's going to stay. He's going to develop a little bit more. So he's, for me, a surefire 103. I would have taken him at 102. I would have considered him at 101 in this draft.
Yeah, I think that I would have considered him at 102 had I been picking as well. But I mean, there's still too much question marks. And of course, we know the volatility of the quarterback position, making that transition for the end stages of your college career and working your way towards the draft. So I have no problems with it. Hopefully, by the time that we get to the 2027 draft, I expect him to be pushing for that. He's definitely going to be drafted pretty high just based on the name alone. We know that does matter. But I do want to hit on that he's not like Peyton and he's not like Eli. He's like his namesake there, Archie Manning, playing back in the day for the Saints, who was more known as a mobile rushing threat. Your mom was a track star. Dad played wide receiver. He comes from a different set of that Manning name, and he really shows it in his play. I will say it to the end of the day. He needs to start making plays. I think going forward, it's really important for Steve Sarkisian to call plays that get him going and feeling confident. You've seen it so many times throughout the season. When he started to feel that confidence, his play really elevated. But moving on, Chris, we got to go 104, and a 2026 pick here. So now it seems like we're alternating 27, 26, 27, 26. Makai Lemon, who would be our 102 in 2026 rookie drafts. My wide receiver won in that class, so I'd love to see him go here. I mean, I don't know what else to say, man. He won the Biletnikoff Award this year for a reason over Jeremiah Smith, which really upset some Buckeyes fans. But I mean, he absolutely earned it with his play on the field. 3.13 yards per route run on the season, 11 touchdowns. He answered all the questions about him. Can he play outside? Yes, he can. He wins with tremendous route running. He's very physical at the catch point. You wouldn't think it for a guy who's listed as 5'11", 195 pounds. He will go up there and he will tack the ball at its highest point and he will come down with it. I talked about kind of his versatility that he presents. He was recruited to USC as an athlete. And in his freshman season, when some cornerbacks went down, he had to go out there and play cornerback for USC. And he did pretty good. He did a pretty good job of locking some guys up when he had to. He made some tackles. Did a pretty good job. So very versatile, very tough. And he brings that physicality to the field. And I'm just excited to see him hit the NFL, man. There's a number of teams that I think could use him. So again, the top of this 2026 class, Chris, is pretty comparable to 2027 so far.
Yeah, and I'm very high on Jordyn Tyson, and we've talked before about Makai Lemon, Carnell Tate, and Jordyn Tyson all being kind of in a tier. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking Lemon right now because he feels like the safest pick out of all those guys. I acknowledge that with Jordyn Tyson, if I'm going to put him ahead, which I am, there's a little bit more volatility there, right? There's going to be a little bit more of a leeway between the ceiling and the floor. Lemon is a great pick at 104 because we know he's going to be a very high pick in 2026. He's already shown it. We've talked before about these different draft classes and how when you get closer and closer in Devy to the NFL draft, you have to bump up guys. Even if you don't love the talent completely, if you have an idea that they're going to be taken very high, this is what we play for, right? This is why players get drafted very high in Dynasty. You know, no matter what your situation is, a lot of people play super flex, tight end premium, whatever. They're going to be taken very early in your first round draft classes. So Makai Lemon, great pick there. You mentioned it. He's all over the field. He's a great guy. Bolitnikov. So this is a safe pick, but a good pick at 104. Moving to 105, we have another 2027 guy, which is Cam Coleman. And right now, we don't even know where he's going to be. We mentioned maybe he would be with Arch Manning. There's a lot of talk right now as we record that he's interested in going to Texas. And I think Texas would be a great place for him, much because of the same things I just mentioned with Arch Manning. His receivers have not been up to snuff. You know, coming into this season, we talked about how good his receivers might be, and they really just weren't. And that contributed a lot to his overall drop in value, at least in the middle of the season, towards the beginning of the season. If he had a guy like Cam Coleman, who we have seen the talent of, but we have seen underwhelming numbers, that might raise his overall value. And he's very intriguing right now because everybody's kept his value extremely high in the Devy world, and for good reason, because we know he's a talented wide receiver, but you don't know what's coming, right? So this is kind of a question mark. Where's the future hold for Cam Coleman? So I'm hoping he goes to Texas, but there's a lot of, I think Texas A&M is in the mix right now. There's a lot of different question marks about where he will ultimately land. So as we record right now, we don't really know, but 105, I think, is a great spot. I considered him even at 103, despite my love for Arch. He was the next wide receiver on my list, even over Makai Lemon, which is crazy. What do you think about him?
I mean, I had him over Makai Lemon on my personal board. If I had 104, I would have taken him there. The only thing that's held Cam Coleman back is his environment there at Auburn. He went from Peyton Thorne last year as a freshman to Jackson Arnold, who just, struggled throwing the ball vertically down the field. He struggled with the forward pass, is what we like to say. He would like to take the ball and run with it and try to make something happen. We obviously know that didn't work out. We have been clamoring for this guy to hit the transfer portal. So when I heard the news, Chris, when it broke, I gave it a sweet hallelujah, baby Jesus, like all of that. Like I was
all did,
hopping and skipping around. People in my office at work were looking at me like, what happened? I'm like, hey guys, look, it's cool. Cam Coleman entered the transfer portal. Looks like Texas is courting him. Texas A&M is having him visit, and it sounds like Alabama is the other team. I don't care where he goes because any of those three spots are such a better environment than Auburn ever was. And you talk about his physical abilities and his traits. It's right up there potential-wise with Jeremiyah Smith. I mean, coming out of high school, these two were ranked pretty close, neck and neck. It was Jeremiyah Smith was the consensus wide receiver 1, and Cam Coleman was the number 2 guy. And you've seen his ability. He's the guy that coined the phrase "aura at the catch point" for me, because seeing the way that he is able to catch the ball and come down and make these miraculous catches, it's beautiful. It's poetic, and it's like a work of art. And I'm so excited for this dude. And for that potential alone, he still has stayed here. Wide receivers we talk about in Devy and Dynasty, they're able to maintain that value even through some tumultuous situations. And he's a guy that we're banking on that talent. If you're just looking at the raw counting stats, it doesn't look that impressive. 598 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns as a freshman, 708 receiving yards this season, and 5 touchdowns. So he dipped down a little bit in the touchdown numbers, but I don't care because I've seen him be good at football. I've seen him sink his hips and hit a double move on these routes and just completely burn in a corner. And Jackson Arnold just overthrowing him inexplicably. Like, he's wide open, man. Just hit him in stride and you get a touchdown. And it was so aggravating to see. So wherever he goes, man, I'm going to be happy. But let's move on to the 106. And that would be Mr. Julian Sayin. And I'm going to let you say some stuff about Julian Sayin, man. Who's this guy from 2027?
Yeah, this was Ben's pick, right? And he was very high on my board. I don't know if I'd take him at 106 because of the leeway. I'm not necessarily that high on him, but I think that he has a very deserved spot here as the second quarterback besides Arch Manning because he has done so much to change the trajectory of his career based on, we talked about, we had a video back in August, what's wrong with Sayin or what's going on with Sayin, when he was still in a battle for the quarterback position. And much like Arch, they played that first game against each other. It was a lot of question marks coming into the beginning of the season. And he's done the opposite of that. He's just been extremely fantastic the entire way of the year. Obviously, the season didn't end the way Ohio State thought, or most of us thought, with Ohio State potentially being in the national championship game. But he's been the best pure quarterback to me in the entire NCAA this year. He's looked like he has true command of the field, even though it's only his first season as a starter. He knows where his receivers are going to be. And you could say, well, that's because he has Carnell Tate. That's because he has Jeremiah Smith. But when I look at what he's doing, when I'm watching the All-22s, when I'm seeing the way he's reading the field, this guy has an advanced command of the field, like a quarterback well beyond his years. So I think this is a great spot as quarterback 2 coming off. And I think there's a lot of reason to be excited for him in the 2027 class.
Yeah, I mean, for a redshirt freshman coming in, his first time starting in the Big Ten, what I love to see about him, Chris, is he's calm in the pocket, 77% completion percentage, and that spikes up to 82.7 adjusted completion percentage. We know he's got good wide receivers, but he's putting it in perfect spots. The big highlight play to Carnell Tate, back of the end zone with like 3 defenders around him. He put it literally in the only spot that he could in order for Carnell Tate to come down with that catch and that touchdown. We did see him in the college football playoffs against Miami and even Indiana to an extent. But we saw him against Miami in the college football playoffs really struggle with pressure. Ruben Bain, Messidor, they were coming after this dude pretty hot and heavy, and you kind of saw the pipes break a little bit, right? We know pressure breaks pipes, and it also breaks young quarterbacks. So that's something that he's got to develop, is processing post-snap or getting the ball away when he needs to. But I mean, for such a young guy, I know he's very highly regarded by like the Devy Royale, our friends at Devy Royale. I believe they still have him as their 2027 quarterback 1. So I have no fault for it. You're projecting and saying, hey, look, he's got Jeremiah Smith, and next year he's going to run it back with freshman Chris Henry Jr., who's an athletic freak in his own right, 6'5", coming in as a freshman. Able to dominate. It's easy to look at him and project him going forward that when he enters the draft in 2027, that he's going to be a top-end quarterback. So I have no faults with the pick here. I think that at 106, getting a guy like that is pretty tremendous value. And now we're starting to see here 2027 with back-to-back picks here on our board.
Yeah, we're starting to see a little bit of a difference between the classes for sure. But I'm going to keep it with the 2026. This was my pick. And as I mentioned, I love Jordyn Tyson. And it's like a weird place for me right now, right? When I look back on what we've talked about all through the Devy Dojo's history, I've always been a Carnell Tate guy. So I'm very excited about Carnell Tate. I think he's a terrific wide receiver. And I've always, stamped my brand on him. But Jordyn Tyson has been the guy who I wasn't even wide receiver 1 on early in the offseason, early in the preseason. Now he's my wide receiver 1 in the 2026 class. And that sounds crazy because he did not have a great statistical performance this year. Him and Levitt weren't as dominant as they were last year in 2024. But he looks great to me when I see the highlights. And that's what I'm looking at, is all of the highs. I want those highs to chase. When I'm talking about, you put 3 wide receivers lumped together, and I want the guy that I think projects as the highest ceiling. And for me, that's Jordyn Tyson. So I would have taken him at 104 over Makai Lemon if I had that pick. He, for me, has the highest ceiling of any of these wide receivers in the 2026 class. And you have to take that with a caveat, right? There's a lot of issues with him. His injury history is the one that comes up the most often. And I don't want to discount that because a lot of it is very different injuries. You know, he's had hamstring, he's had knee, he's had shoulder, collarbone, whatever. It's been all over his body. And at some point, you have to ask yourself the question, does this add up to a guy who's just not going to be on the field? And that's a very acceptable question to ask. But if I'm using a first-round pick on a wide receiver, I want the guy with the most talent. For me personally, I don't want to worry about X, Y, Z because there's a lot, especially before he's drafted. What are the question marks? There's a ton of question marks. But we see this guy for sure being a first-round pick in 2026. And for me, it might be a good thing that he's a little bit more off the radar, that there might be a wide receiver or two in front of him drafted in 2026, because that means he's pushed back a little bit in the draft and he's going to be taken by a team that knows how to use him a little bit better. So I think he's the guy that has the most alpha potential of all these wide receivers in the 2026 class. That's why I have him as my wide receiver 1 in 2026, and that's why I'm happy to take him here at 107 in this 2026 versus 2027 mock draft.
Yeah, it's a little risky here, Chris, just because of the injury history. I think that there's some guys in the 2027 class I still would prefer over him. But I love Jordyn Tyson, man. I was singing his praises going back to last season. Hell, even at Colorado, man. Like, at Colorado, he didn't do very much, only 466 yards receiving. But it was pretty clear and very evident on a very bad Colorado Buffaloes team that he was the standout there. And of course, the stuff with Prime pushing people out. He ended up in Arizona State, and it worked. 2024. He showed what he's all about. 1,000 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns. He's able to do it all, Chris, but you can't talk about the highs without talking about the lows. And the injury concerns, the thoughts of if he can stay on the field, those are very real, and they do matter. Strong hands, he can win in a variety of ways. I do love the pick, but I just think that there's some guys that I would prefer after him. But keeping it moving along, 108, who do we got there?
Carnell Tate, of course, who is another guy who I've been very high on, as I just mentioned. I love this guy, man. My mantra has always been just take these Ohio State wide receivers. It might have to change now that Bryant Hartline is gone. He got his shot as a head coach down at USF, but these legacy wide receivers that he's always going to be able to stamp his name on. And Carnell Tate might be the last of them other than Jeremiah Smith, because he's really made this guy this year exactly what I envisioned. Who's a true dominant. He's one of the most pro-ready wide receivers that I think we've seen in a while, because he's shown his ability to just completely outmatch defensive backs, which is one of the things I like the most about his overall game. So when you are evaluating him from a pure, what can he do standpoint, obviously I just took Jordyn Tyson over him. I think there's a little bit more of an alpha highlight reel potential on Jordyn Tyson, but Carnell Tate is just the consummate professional. I think he can outlast defensive backs, no matter if it's going long or if it's cutting in and avoiding those tackles and getting open space. I think he's a fantastic route runner. I think he's got the ability to make catches all over the field. And there's a really good chance that Carnell Tate might actually be the first wide receiver taken in the 2026 draft.
Yeah, I wouldn't fault anybody for it. Like these last couple wide receivers that we've looked at between Cam Coleman, 2027, Jordyn Tyson, and Carnell Tate here in the 2026 class, if you're just looking at the raw numbers, if you're just looking at their production profile, you might have some questions. And I think that these are all examples of guys that you really have to go in and watch the tape. Carnell Tate, even going back to last season, we said as at best third read in the progression was out there making plays, over 700 yards receiving. He still didn't crack 1,000 yards receiving this year, but he did kind of end the injury a little banged up, missed 1 or 2 games potentially, I can't remember. But his production really kind of slowed down towards the end. And even in the game against Miami, I saw him, short necking some throws here. It was pretty evident that he saw the safety coming down the middle. He had a little curl. curl route, and he saw the safety coming, and he just kind of eked, and he didn't stretch out like you normally would see a Carnell Tate do to make that play and absorb the contact. So I think that definitely affected some of his play down the course of the season. But this dude's draft stock is pretty set. You know that NFL scouts are salivating at him. 6'3", 195 pounds. He's an Ohio State wide receiver who was coached and recruited by Brian Hartline, the aforementioned Brian Hartline. And look, those guys just coming in the NFL ready to play. We've said it time and time again. Don't overthink it. Just take the Ohio State wide receiver. And I'm looking at the board again, Chris, and I do have to just say, after going back-to-back 27, now we got back-to-back 2026.
That's right, we do. And Ahmad Hardy is a running back who we have been pounding the table for a while now. And he's looked fantastic at Missouri. You know, Missouri started out extremely hot in the year. Everybody was talking about him and about Bo Pribula, who's now in the transfer portal. But Ahmad Hardy has been showing us everything we expected here in this season. He's got an amazing missed tackles force metric, which is one of our here at the Devy Dojo favorite metrics. And he just looks like a guy who can be a true all-around running back, which is what you want in the modern NFL, right? The longer you can stay on the field, the more fantasy value you're going to have for us. And he can catch passes decently well. And most importantly, he can dominate in the running game all over the field. He can run inside. He can run outside. He's everywhere. So he's been fantastic so far at Missouri. And 109 is a great spot to take him. I agree with this pick completely as the second running back off the board.
Yeah, this was my pick. And this is a guy, when I saw guys like Jordyn Tyson and Carnell Tate going, I understood the process, especially them being wide receivers. But, man, there's something about Ahmad Hardy. And he, to me, he's my 2027 running back one in that draft class. You talked about his missed tackles forced. You said it was outstanding. Specifically, man, it's 97 missed tackles forced on the season. Going back to last season, he had 93 missed tackles forced. So, I mean, he just continued to do that. And, of course, we know as a freshman, he played at Louisiana Monroe, you know, lower level competition. He took the jump this last offseason to SEC level play, entering the transfer portal to go to Missouri. And we saw him continue to dominate. He actually had more rushing yards this season, over 1,600 rushing yards, 16 touchdowns. I said the 97 missed tackles forced, but check this out, Chris. Of his 1,600 rushing yards, over 1,000 of them came after contact, because he's a tough SOB, man. You've seen him out there. I've comped him to Mark Ingram at times just because of that physicality. You see at the goal line, 3-4 defenders on him, and he just continues to move those legs, and he's going to drive, and he's going to get into the end zone. He has that nose for the end zone. 16 rushing touchdowns this season, 13 last season, 29 in his career. Ultra productive. And behind a somewhat, suspect offensive line in Missouri too, comparatively to other SEC programs, they weren't really the best unit out there in terms of run blocking. And so that's why you had to see him make plays after contact, make people miss. He's a weapon out there, man. And I fully expect him to continue to do that. And I without a shadow of a doubt, he's going to be the first running back taken off the board in 2027.
Yeah. And if I could just sidebar real quick, we talked about a lot of those same things with Ashton Jeanty last year. And there's a lot of reason to be down on him right now because the Raiders offense hasn't been great, but Jeanty was behind maybe the worst offensive line in the NFL this year, and he still had over 1,000 yards after contact. So
ridiculous.
A lot of these guys that you project to be that kind of player, you have to have faith in. So even if you're still holding on to Ashton Jeanty and you're like, this is, I'm going to get rid of him. The Raiders aren't great. Do not do that. Trust your training, as we say here in the dojo. Ahmad Hardy is very much in that mold. And Jeanty's still a great running back, and Ahmad Hardy will be the next of that type of player. Moving on, Ben might have taken a little bit of a homer pick with Home Run Hayes, who even as we did this draft was potentially going to the draft, potentially going back to the NCAA. And as we record, it's still kind of up in the air. I think we're all thinking he's going to go back to Michigan.
Yeah.
However, he's a very talented running back. We gave him the nickname Home Run Haynes for a reason. I would love to see him come out. I think it's bad for him personally. My opinion is do not go back. But if he can make a lot of money, I get it. I feel the same way about Justice Haynes as I do about Ty Simpson, who just today declared that he's going to the NFL draft, which is there's a a very much lack of depth at your position. So just go while you can and get the draft capital that you need to have a future. That's how I feel about Justice Haynes. However, he's a very talented running back. So even if he goes back to the NCAA, there's a good reason to still love him on your Devy rosters because he should be productive. One of the things we knocked on him coming into the year was that he didn't have anything substantial in the background of his career, which was, the transfer obviously from Alabama. And he had an absolutely fantastic year until he got hurt. So I can't knock him for coming back and putting some more stats on the radar, getting a whole year under his belt to really show that potentially he could be the next Jeremiyah Love, the first running back off the board in the 2027 class. However, it's going to be an uphill battle for him because there's a lot of, like Ahmad Hardy, of course, there's going to be a lot of good running backs coming out next year too. So it's kind of a risk, but less of a risk in the modern NIL era.
Yeah, I think just looking at the pure lack of depth in 2026 at the position, it probably would have behooved him to return. But I mean, he's signing a new NIL deal with SeatGeek. And I just can't help but shake the feeling, Chris, that he wants to put together a full season of healthy tape for scouts. Because we know when he was like Justice Haynes missed some time now with some injury. He went out, but when he was in, man, he was cooking. And this is my favorite Justice Haynes stat for this season, that every single game that he played healthy this season, rushed for over 100 yards. He was always a threat to take one to the house. Yeah. It's an amazing stat. It's mind-boggling to think. We were living it in the moment, man. Like, is he going to do it again? Always playing Oklahoma. That's a really good Brent Venables coach defense coming out.
He had a lot of long rushes. Every game it was like there was a big breakout rush from Justice Haynes.
He is a home run threat, home run Haynes for a reason. But moving on to 111.
Dante Moore. That's my guy, man. This was my pick. And if you've been following the dojo for a while, you know that I planted my flag early on in the offseason as a hater of Dante Moore. And this has been such a turning point in the growth of me as an analyst. I love Dante Moore, man. Just watching him throw the ball is a thing of beauty. I had a lot of knocks on him at UCLA because of his lack of production. And I feel like I was justified at the time, but I also feel like I've made the complete flip around to being a hater to a full-blown lover. He's my number one quarterback in the 2026 draft if he actually declares. I think he's probably leaning declare, but it's still so up in the air, man.
It's so up in the air, man. 1 minute I think he's declaring for sure. I'm like, okay, Will Stein took the Kentucky head coaching job. He's for sure going in now. He's elevated his stock. And then you hear, a Ty Simpson declaring, and it's like, okay, is Ty Simpson getting word that Dante Moore isn't going to declare? Is Dante Moore seeing the Jets there at number 2 and saying, you know what, I'm not going to go to some trash organization, because we know environment is one of the most important factors for success for these quarterbacks at the next level. So is it better for me to return to school, still make millions of dollars? Like, he's going to make comparatively to probably a top 15 pick, at least in NIL money. So, I mean, could you do that and further elevate your stock? But of course, that always presents a risk, right? There was plenty of quarterbacks that we predicted to be at the top of 2026, and their value just absolutely tanked. So that always presents a risk. He's going to have a new offensive coordinator. What is he doing, man? I don't know what it is. I don't know how to assign Justice Haynes and Dante Moore, whether this is a 2026 pick or a 2027. But I do know that I love the player Dante Moore. I love his accuracy. I love the poise that he could play with. He has a little bit of that clutch in him too. Not really a rushing threat, but he's going to kill you with that accuracy, that deadly.
Yeah, I don't see him being very much, he's the opposite of what I usually look for in a quarterback from fantasy point of view, which is the rushing. But he has such poise in the pocket, and his release is absolutely, he just throws that thing like crazy, and it's so lightning fast. I think he's very, very well developed as a quarterback right now. He's shown us at Oregon that he could process the field extremely fast. He's played against great defenses this year, and he's done it even in clutch, even against my boys, Penn State. So if he goes back, I won't blame him, but I think he should come, who was it? Dan Orlovsky, I think, was saying that he should call the Jets and say, are you going to take me? And if they say yes, he should just go back because he doesn't want to be a Jet. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think the Jets is a decent spot to land for a quarterback because they have relatively decent wide receivers. They obviously have Garrett Wilson. We'll see what the future holds for him. Adonai Mitchell has been fantastic for them ever since the trade. Dante Moore would be, in my opinion, going to an underrated spot if he ended up with the Jets. We'll see what the future holds for him, but I love the talent.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that, Chris, because I don't think that the Jets would be a good landing spot for him. And I agree with Dan. If he hears that, I mean, yeah, he's got a good set of weapons, but who's going to protect for him? I don't trust the ownership. This is the same owner that uses Madden ratings to determine what players he's going to get. And again, like environment, and that starts from the top down to the bottom. Aaron Glenn ain't going to last, man. They're going to lose games, and they're going to be searching for a new head coach. He'd likely have to be learning a new playbook. I don't think it's a good spot. And if I were him, I would genuinely think about it. Like, if it's the Jets, I'm going back to school. I'm going to
go. If he could get $5 million from Oregon, even without his offensive coordinator, why not? Right? Let's just re-roll and see. But like you said, It's been a weird season for quarterbacks. A lot of these guys that we thought were going to be very surefire first, second round picks are falling off. The Klubniks, the Nussmeyers. But moving on, we have CJ Carr. This was Josh's pick at 112. CJ Carr, the Notre Dame quarterback, has looked extremely good this year. Obviously, Notre Dame, I talk a lot of smack on them, but they probably should have been in the playoff. And CJ Carr has proved that they made the right choice, taking him over Minchie here to start the season. He's had a very good year. What do you think about CJ Carr?
I mean, I really like him. He's a guy that's decently mobile, but he's not going to kill you with his legs. But again, another guy that's relatively accurate. An adjusted completion percentage of 73%. He passed for nearly 3,000 yards. Nothing alarming. Again, though, it's Notre Dame. They're going to run the ball primarily. But they haven't had this level of talent at the quarterback position probably since Brady Quinn back in the day. And that's a name from back in the day. So I am excited for him. They're clearly trying to build around him. There was rumors of Nick Marsh potentially hitting the transfer portal there. We know, of course, Nick Marsh did not go there. He went somewhere else, but we'll talk about him a little later. So I think the sky's the limit for him. I think that he's just going to get better. Redshirt freshman, this is his first year starting, and we saw everything that we need to see for me to comfortably project him as my quarterback 2 in the 2027 draft class. And we will see. A lot changes in college football. We know things happen fast, but as of now, I think that he's a solid bet to get that high-end draft capital. And I have him on a couple Devy spots, and I'm excited, man. I got him really cheap. Like, if you were drafting CJ Carr in the offseason in Devy, you were getting him late, even in deep drafts. I think I got him in like the 15th or 17th round because people just didn't know either. We didn't know if it was going to be Minchie and Jelly was still around at the time. There was a legit 3-headed quarterback competition at one point.
Yeah, you're certainly happy if you got him a little bit late. I personally wouldn't have taken him this high. I would have definitely had him in the mid-second round. There's a lot of running backs and wide receivers that I would have preferred over him. But I love what we've seen out of him. He's a great quarterback. And to his benefit, as a certified Notre Dame hater, they have a pretty easy schedule next year. So he's got an opportunity to really develop his overall game and pump his stats up a little bit to make himself a big name in the 2027 draft class.
Yeah.
Moving on to 201. You started us off with your guy, Kewan Lacy.
Yeah, and I mean, you gave me a great introduction to this, talking about some wide receivers and running backs that you would rather have over him. And we talked about the missed tackles force metric for Ahmad Hardy. Kewan Lacy was second in the nation behind him. It's just truly incredible what he did for Ole Miss this season. We know that old Lane Kiffin out there, he loves a workhorse. Back when he had Quinshon Judkins at Ole Miss, he was a volume back. He gave him a lot of carries, and we saw the same thing here with Kewan Lacy. Of course, we know that he transferred this offseason from Mizzou to Ole Miss, and man, I don't want to say nobody saw him coming, but there wasn't very many that were doubting Kewan Lacy before the season. And we even saw it in this last game versus Georgia, man. Dude was out there making plays with Trinidad Chambliss. Like, I think a key fourth down where he caught the pass from Trinidad after he ran around and made some magic happen. He gets hit by a Georgia defender pretty hard, and it stifled him a little bit, and he had to use power to, move his way for the first down. And that's just something that you saw consistently over the season. Looking at his rushing stats right now, nearly 1,000 yards after contact. Specifically, that missed tackles force metric that I cited, 88 on the season. Nearly 1,500 rushing yards, 23 touchdowns, Chris. 23 rushing touchdowns just this season as his first year full-time starter. I mean, I don't know what else you want to see from him. He's not really used too much as a weapon. 28 catches on the year, less than 200 yards. But I mean, he's functional on screens. He's going to take those dump offs. He's going to provide enough of a floor at the next level, I think, and continuing forward to be a very safe bet. He's my running back 2 in the 2027 class, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's higher. I thought maybe he might go to Lane Kiffin again, with Lane Kiffin taking the LSU head coaching job. But he said, man, he's staying put at Ole Miss.
Yeah, and so did Trinidad if he gets his eligibility. So I kind of admire these guys for staying at Ole Miss and just being true to the brand. And he was a guy who, I came on a little bit later, but you have talked me into him. I think he's a very good running back, and I'm very excited about his future. I would love to see him be a little bit more involved in the passing game, because I think that he does have the talent to do it. So we'll see what the next coaching staff has in store for him. Next up, we have LaNorris Sellers. This was Ben's pick, and if you've listened to the Dojo, you know that I am a big LaNorris Sellers guy, so I don't mind this pick here at all. I think he has such an extremely high dynasty floor, but I'm so mad that he's going back to South Carolina, man. Yeah, I last year I admired it because we know, he went back, he got offered more money to go other places. He wanted to do it right. And what we saw out of him was a rough year where his adjusted completion percentage was much higher than his actual completion percentage, because there's nothing there for him, man. His wide receivers are not doing it for him. His offensive line is not doing it for him. The talent level on this kid is tremendous. I always talk about I watch the interviews. I talk about the intangibles. I think he's a true leader. I think he's a fantastic kid. I think he wants to be the best version of himself. And I admire the fact that he's not leaving South Carolina. But for his ultimate fantasy value, it pains me that he's going back to South Carolina.
Because the only thing that's held his value right now is that potential. And I'm starting to come off of him a little bit. I still am rooting for him, but man, kind of the final straw for me was hearing that he was returning to South Carolina. And while, I do like those stories of kids staying with the programs that invested in them, that believed in him. He wasn't very highly recruited coming out of high school after sustaining an injury as a high school senior. He was only a 3-star. He got a chance to play in the SEC, not a blue blood program, but, SEC competition nonetheless. And he really regressed in some areas. You talk about his offensive line. Some of the blame has to go to LaNorris Sellers. I understand it. We've both watched tape on him. We've seen the wide receivers not creating separation. You got a track star out there, Nick Harbor, as your wide receiver 1. Another guy full of potential, but who hasn't really refined the nuances of his game. And a bunch of other people, even including his younger brother out there for weapons. But some of the blame has to go to him. We know the magic of LaNorris Sellers being able to run around and make magic sometimes. But lately, this season, 3.15 time to throw, he was holding on to the ball too long. I always said with him, the metric is going to be a little skewed because he does run around and try to make those plays. But you saw at times he wasn't confident in his reading of the defense's post snap. And that's what concerns me with him going back to South Carolina, because I don't believe in Shane Beamer and whoever the offensive coordinator is now, the name is escaping me. I don't trust them to develop him to be a pro quarterback. And potential alone will only get you so far. Now, it might get you drafted 4th overall like Anthony Richardson, but at the NFL, you are not going to beat defenses based on athleticism alone. Those defenses are at your caliber, if not better. We're low-key playing in one of the greatest defensive eras that nobody's talking about right now because of the way that defenses are able to scheme. So if you're not able to read a defense at the collegiate level, I don't really have very much confidence that you're going to be able to make that transition to the pros. So that's my only pushback. I think I think he's too high. I still believe in the talent, but I think that 202 in a combined mock is just simply too high.
I would tend to agree. And if, it was pre-Dojo era, but if you've known me at all in any of our Discords, I was very anti Anthony Richardson, despite the fact that I think he's a tremendous human being. And I'm getting the same vibes right now from LaNorris Sellers. Like, I love Anthony Richardson. I would love to see him succeed. I love LaNorris Sellers. I would love to see him succeed. But my personal bet on Anthony Richardson was that he was just not going to succeed at the NFL level. And now that LaNorris is deciding to stay at South Carolina, I think I'm kind of getting those same. That was a common comp early on, in this last offseason was Anthony Richardson. And I didn't like it because I was so anti-Anthony Richardson. But we're starting to get in the same feel. He's going to have more starts under his belt than Anthony Richardson did, but it's just I agree. This is a little too high for me in a combined mock. Next up was my pick, and I took Chris Brazzell, even though I was thinking about Denzel Boston. I like these receivers both, and I think I juggle them. They're very close in my rankings. But Chris Brazzell, when I look at him, it's hard to escape the whole Tennessee wide receiver, the mantra. You don't take them. They don't do well at the NFL level. But he's just so much of a freak that I love him, man. He's so tall. He's so fast. He does everything well, I feel like. He runs appropriate routes. He comes back to his quarterback really well. He catches the ball. I think that there's so much upside from him, and that's a common theme with me, if you can't tell, with wide receivers. I'm shooting for upside because we know that every year there's going to be receivers taken in the first and second round of Dynasty mock drafts and all that aren't going to make it. So Chris Brazzell, for me, I just want to bet on the upside and see what happens.
I mean, what's not to like about a guy who's 6'5", can run legitimate routes, right? He's more than a deep threat, and there's this perceived notion that his game is that of only one of a vertical deep threat. And while that is one of his superpowers, and it's going to be one of the things that makes scouts salivate at the next level, there's so much more nuance to his game. Now, he still needs to refine more of a full route tree. I won't say that he runs a full route tree yet. I do kind of blame that on Tennessee. Now, there is that stigma around them, like you talked about. But I mean, for me, he broke the mold of those wide receivers. And I've talked about it a little bit on the Devy Dojo. Tennessee was running more pro-style concepts this year. They wasn't the ultra-wide sets always. Now, they still utilized that and had that at times, but you saw more condensed sets, more motions, more pro-style heartbeats to the offense. And so because of that, I was in on him early. I think that his stock in the fantasy community has kind of dwindled a little bit, but I don't think that it's dwindled for NFL scouts. I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to be an NFL first-round talent in 2026. And because of that, I think that at 203, he presents really good value because, like you said, I probably at this point would take him at the end of the first over CJ Carr. Now that I've kind of had some more time to think about it, I think that would be a better spot for some of these guys with a Kewan Lacy or Chris Brazzell. I think that I would rather have them at the end of the first, just based on where they are. And even the proximity to the NFL draft for me increases his value a little bit.
Of course, yeah. Which is what we always talk about. It's better to be closer to the draft than away from the draft because you have more surefire value return. Next up, we have Isaac Brown, who is a running back we both really love. I know we've comped him to Devon Achane before, and he is a fantastic, fast running back, even if he is a little bit undersized like Devon Achane.
Yeah, another 2027 guy here. Louisville offense, man, he so fast. I'll ad nauseum, I've said this, man, but take those running backs with the spike week potential. And that's what he can do on any given play. Now, he was a little knocked up this season, missed some games. But, man, his breakaway percentage is something else on PFF. And just such a treat to watch. I won't say he's as elusive as a Devon Achane, but that speed, the ability to hit the top speed quickly is really what separates him. And look, at the time of this recording, 247 had projected him 100% crystal ball projection to go to the Texas Longhorns. And we're like, oh man, Texas is gearing up. They're throwing the bag at this dude. And just recently, I think as of yesterday, we heard that he said, actually, I'm not entering the transfer portal. I've decided to go back to Louisville. And while that doesn't hurt his overall stock, because we were already in on him, it doesn't quite vault him to the level that we were thinking, because we're saying, hey, look, get him in a better offense. Texas had a bunch of running backs hit the portal in Wisner and CJ Baxter. We're like, look, he could be a day one starter in a what we assume will be a good offense. So I'm not out on him. It's just, I don't know if I would take him right here, but still another great running back in that 2027 class.
I love this spot for him because with running back specifically, we know that it doesn't necessarily matter what your background is and what your overall projection is. It matters about what you get at the NFL level. And I think he's going to get an opportunity no matter what school he comes out of. So I think this is a great spot. I think Josh was right to take him here at 204. 205, we just mentioned him, Denzel Boston. I'm very big on this guy. Him and Brazzell are so close. It's almost like another tier. We talk about the top 3-tier wide receivers. These guys in 2026 are neck and neck for me, and I think Denzel Boston has a potentially better chance now. I've said before it might be Brazzell to be a first-round pick, but Boston, I feel like, might be edging him out a little bit. He seems to be getting a little bit more steam in the NFL, world, the mock draft world. And he's got those insanely strong hands that I could understand why teams that are in the playoffs would want to take him. He would be a perfect fit for the Buffalo Bills.
That's been my dream landing spot. You know that. But everything that he does good is what the Buffalo Bills need. He's a contested catch freak, man. 77% contested catch rate on the season is just insane. 11 touchdowns. He's a red zone threat. I could just imagine Josh Allen throwing up, fade balls, fades to him in the end zone, and just him coming down with it. 11 touchdowns on the season. He hasn't hit 1,000 yards receiving, and some people are going to nitpick that. Even on the last mock episode, I had some people in the comments asking, should I be concerned that he's never hit this? And I'm like, no, you have to understand the context behind the situations. Of course, first couple of years, he was playing behind 3 NFL level wide receivers and Rome Odunze, McMillan, all those guys there. And then, Damon Williams and the way Jed Fish called plays on offense, they didn't always attack vertically like that. Damon Williams, with being a mobile quarterback, was always a threat to run and take the ball himself and make some plays. But he always made magic when it counted, right? And that was always in the red zone. And I think that those skills are going to translate to an NFL team. And I think there's room for him and Chris Brazzell to be first-round picks in the NFL draft, personally.
I would agree with that. I think that's probably likely at this point. We'll see how it shakes out as we get closer to the combine. Benny picked the first tight end off the board in Kenyon Sadiq, and I think we both have him pretty close to our tight end one for good reason. He's pretty all around. He's probably the surefire bet to be a first-round tight end if there's anyone in the 2026 class. And I love this guy. You watch Oregon. He's still playing. He's still in the playoff. He's a fantastic tight end at doing it all, which is why I think NFL GMs are going to really love him. He's a talented receiver, but he can do the other stuff well enough that he's going to have a spot to stay on the field at the NFL level more so than a lot of these other, fantasy tight ends who are only running routes. He can line up in line, he can block, he can run block, he can pass block, and I think ultimately he has a reasonably high ceiling, even if I personally think Michael Trigg might be slightly higher as a fantasy asset.
Yeah, I mean, you're spitting right now, man. You preaching to the choir here. I love the upside of Kenyon Sadiq. I still haven't definitively put him as my personal tight end one, but I mean, at this point, he's the guy that's getting all the steam in those mock drafts, and I think those NFL scouts are going to love him just for that athletic upside that he presents as a receiver. You mentioned his blocking, of course, it's good, but he's going to make his money in the NFL as a receiving threat.
Absolutely. And he looks like a good bet to be in the first round. Let's go on to the next pick, which is Jonah Coleman, who is a guy who has been kind of all over the board. I feel like we both had him very high early on in the year as RB2 in this upcoming 2026 class. And he's kind of had a good year and then a bad year in some respects, depending on the stats you're looking at. But when I'm staring at Jonah Coleman, he's a guy who I feel like can be an all-around running back. And much like I just talked about with Isaac Brown, it doesn't necessarily matter what your stats are in college, what your overall, grade is coming out, what all the pundits are saying matters to you. Really, it's going to be one team puts their faith in Jonah Coleman and gives him the rock early on. And that's kind of what I expect out of him. I think he's going to be a very good running back at the NFL level. I'm not expecting him to be, a Jahmyr Gibbs or a Bijan Robinson where he's a coveted dynasty asset. But I think that he's got a very, very good shot to be drafted reasonably early, like a day 2 pick. and get the majority of carries in an NFL backfield really quickly, because we haven't seen like a ton of receiving talent out of him, but we've seen him take it to the house on receiving catches. We've seen him run inside. We've seen him run outside. We see his missed tackles force as an overall, not necessarily this year, but as an overall career stat, being one of the elite ones in this upcoming draft class. So for me, Jonah Coleman is still a highly coveted running back asset in the 2026 class, probably still my RB2.
Yeah, Jonah Coleman is one of those guys that you really have to watch the film on, because again, if you're just box score scouting, if you're just looking at the raw counting stats, you're like, look, less than 800 rushing yards, 15 touchdowns looks nice, but he started the season off with back-to-back 100 rushing yards, and then he didn't hit 100 yards again for the rest of the season. In fact, he didn't top 75 or 80 yards more than once on the season after that. But again, there's some context with that. He struggled with injuries, some kind of like lingering injuries throughout the season. He did have to sit some games. Muhammad took over for him and looked pretty decent in that offense as well. So that played into it. But man, when somebody shows me that they're good at football, I pay attention and I remember that. And even if he gets early day 3 draft cap, I will still be in, because I'm banking on the talent. I'm going to trust my training. And I think that he would outperform that draft cap. But I think we're both pretty locked in that he's more than likely a day 2, whether that's round 3, or round 2. He's somewhere in there in day 2, pretty locked in for me. So I have no concerns. I'm glad that you talked about his receiving ability, because he's better than a lot of people think. Now, he's not going to be running any crazy routes out there, but I saw him before he cut weight, when he was still rushing last year at 235 pounds, on a screen pass. He hurdled a dude. He hurdled a couple dudes. He was trying to be like Jeremiyah Love out there hurdling these guys. And, the big old fat man out there, 235 pounds of just this massive man doing that was pretty impressive. And then, of course, we know he cut weight to 223 at the start of the season, got down to 8% body fat. It's a shame that he got his body right to try to elevate the draft stock. And then, of course, the injuries kind of played a factor into that. Didn't quite have the year that we expected, but I'm still all in on Jonah.
Which is interesting, right? Because it almost seemed like there was some receiving talent more so when he was a little bit bigger than there was this year when he slimmed down a little bit. But I'm very excited for him long term, and I think ultimately he's got a good shot to be a very productive NFL running back. Now, finally, we get the presumptive 101 2026 draft pick in the NFL, which is Fernando Mendoza. And we've had a lot of discussions about this guy up and down. For a while, I had Ty Simpson higher than him. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but Ty Simpson just declared. For me, I like Fernando Mendoza if you want a safe quarterback, especially in Superflex. I've said before, I think he's got a Jared Goff type projection for his career, not necessarily as a play style comp, but for a career where he's going to have a long starting career in the NFL. I think he's a very intelligent quarterback. I think he's got enough talent to prove that he can be a starting quarterback in the NFL. So for me, he's a very safe pick, but I don't see an entirely high ceiling on him like I do from a Dante Moore or a LaNorris Sellis.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, Chris. Fernando has rose up my board a little bit here. I mean, again, the proximity to the draft, and we know he's likely to be the first quarterback taken in the NFL draft, naturally will move you up the board. But I mean, as I've started to dive into the tape of him, I have been a little more impressed than I was originally. And he's not an elite talent by any means. He doesn't have an elite arm. He has some good functional mobility in the pocket and the ability to create plays out of it. And that's going to give him, I think, a safe floor for fantasy. But where he's deadly, man, is in the red zone. He didn't throw a single interception this season while he was in the red zone, 36 touchdowns. It's the reason he won the Heisman. He had Elijah Surratt lined up out there. Omar Cooper Jr. was making big time catches, the most insane catch of the year versus Penn State this season.
Don't do it.
Sorry, I had to do it, man.
That was a great catch, though. I mean, that was more on Omar Cooper, but it was amazingly placed.
And that, thank you for admitting that, because the placement is what mattered. If he put it anywhere else, Omar Cooper Jr. is not able to make that catch. Now, it was a tremendous catch of the year. But Fernando, let's not act like on that game-winning drive, he wasn't making big-time throws to put them in that position. with clock running down, all the pressure in the world on him. And that has been the theme of the season. It's why he won the Heisman. It's why he's likely to be the top drafted quarterback. Now, if he goes to the Raiders, I don't hate that landing spot for fantasy. He's got a good set of young weapons in Brock Bowers right there. Obviously, Ashton Genty. They got to solidify the offensive line a little bit there. But I trust Tom Brady as an owner there to do the right thing. They just fired Pete Carroll. So we're going to see what happens. Rumors are that they want John Harbaugh. And now John Harbaugh goes there. I trust that environment. And the Raiders have over $100 million in cap space. So that in free agency, they're going to be able to hopefully build a team around him. And of course, we're projecting him to be the top pick there by the Raiders.
Harbaugh's been awesome because he's had Joe Flacco and Lamar Jackson, so completely different quarterbacks. So he could definitely come in and take over a Fernando Mendoza rookie year and make him a very talented quarterback long term. I love that landing spot.
And what have we said before? On this podcast, we have said that while he may not have elite traits, the intangibles that he has as a leader of men on the field and off the field, I think that he can change and turn around a program. And so going to the Las Vegas Raiders, a team that has not won very much lately in the past, 15 years?
20
really?
years, yeah.
Yeah, like it's been a long time since I see my divisional rival Raiders be good. And unfortunately for me as a Denver Broncos fan, I think that he'd be a guy to be able to get them back to relevancy.
It's fun to make fun of his, post-game interviews and all that on Twitter or whatever, but the teammates love that, man. That's pure passion. So I'm excited for him. I think he's got a long career ahead of him. Trey'Dez Green, we have a number 2 tight end coming off the block here at 209, a 2027 potential first overall tight end.
Yeah, I was salivating to take this guy. Now, this was my pick here, and I was saying, like, I'm either taking Mendoza if he falls to me, because I don't think Mendoza should have been this low at this point. But also, we hadn't taken very many tight ends, and I had an opportunity to take my 2027 tight end one, Trey'Dez Green, a legit 6'7" dude. He does not look like a tight end out there. He's kind of got that like slender frame, but you talk about a mismatch nightmare. The way that this guy is able to attack the ball vertically just because of his sheer height and long arms, like the catch radius that this dude has, it's insane. Even in his last bowl game that he made an insane catch in the red zone, and that's going to be where he makes his money. And I'm excited, man. Like Sam Levitt is potentially going to LSU. I think that could be a decent pairing for him. I think certainly better than what Garrett Nussmeier was able to provide for LSU this season. So with Lane Kiffin there too, I mean, Lane Kiffin he's always done a good job of scheming his weapons open. I don't know that Lane's really ever had a tight end of this caliber. Now, we know when Lane Kiffin was at USC, he did have Michael Trigg for a minute, and I think this is kind of what he had envisioned. So I'm super excited for this pairing. His draft stock, his stock in Devy has already been really high. He has a lot of people's tight end one in Devy, including mine, and I think we're just going to see it continue to elevate, man. This guy has so much potential, and I don't get excited about very many tight ends, but he's one that I'm very, very excited for.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't want to pine on too much about him, but I think his receiving upside is tremendous, and I think there's a good reason to take him even over Kenyon Sadiq in a combined mock that we're doing here. So I think this was very good value. It was a great spot for him. Bryant Wesco is another guy who I necessarily wasn't always like big on, but he's a talented wide receiver, and I think he's been a little bit underrated lately because of the overall decline of Clemson and Klubnik specifically just not being as great of a quarterback as we expected. I think Wesco's a talented wide receiver overall, kind of like we expected Makai Lemon before he had the career year that he did this year with the Biletnikoff, in that same kind of vein where I think he can line up pretty much all over the field. He's a great yak threat, and I think he's still got a little bit of untapped potential, even if I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of him.
Watch some more tape on him, Chris. Man, before the reason why he hasn't been getting much steam is because he's been injured. He suffered a really it was tough to watch, man. The way he came down on his neck. We all thought, like, could it be worse? Could it be another Justin Ross situation, another former Clemson wide receiver? Spinal stuff. There was a lot of rumblings. Turns out he's fine. He's going to be ready to play at the start of next season. But he was balling to start the season, man. He had 2 straight 100-yard games and then another one multiple touchdowns in those games. And, for a wide receiver trio there that included Antonio Williams, TJ Moore, and Bryant Wesco, he wasn't the guy that too many people had as the alpha dog. And he really took over for TJ Moore. And then, of course, Antonio Williams went out, a struggling Klubnik. Bryant Wesco was out there balling, man. And he was doing some exciting things. And I think that it's just a product of the fantasy community. If we're not seeing you, we're not thinking of you. Well, I go to bed thinking about Bryant Wesco, and that's not weird because I just dream of those plays that he makes, man. The way he's balling. I actually made a trade for him and Devy here pretty recently. I'm all in, man. I got him low, and I'm super excited. And I think that by the time the 2027 draft rolls around, we're going to be talking about this guy much more highly because he has first-round wide receiver potential. He's an alpha.
Yeah, we'll see what the future holds for him, and I don't think this is a bad spot to take him. And obviously, we mentioned at the top of the show that we're going to be doing a third and fourth round of this very same 26 versus 27 draft. So for me, I might have let him go a little bit further, but this isn't a bad spot to take him. This was my last pick of the draft, which is Jeremy Bernard. And if you've listened to the Dojo at all, you know that I'm very high on this guy. I think he's a locked-in day 2 pick. I think he can do it all. And much in that same vein, I don't think he's necessarily, an alpha. He's not going to have the highest of ceilings, but I love taking in the second round wide receivers that are just certified dogs that can do it all. And that's exactly what he can do. He can run all over the field. He can line up anywhere. He's been taking snaps out of the backfield because they didn't have Hollywood Smothers this year, right? Hollywood, who I love, just committed to them as a transfer. But they didn't really have any running game. So he was taking snaps out of the backfield. He was all over the place, and he was locked in as Ty Simpson's number 1 guy throughout the year. As Ryan Williams has seen his stock fall, Jeremy Bernard has seen his stock rise. And I love this guy so much. I think that he, much like Mendoza, is going to have a very long future in the NFL. I think he's got a certified 10-year career ahead of him. Maybe not as, the guy that's going to get you a billion catches every year. He's never going to necessarily be a wide receiver 1 for Dynasty, but a guy who you're happy to take in the second round of any Dynasty draft and lock him into your lineup forever as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, flex, whatever. I really like what I see out of him. I think there's a very safe floor with him.
I'd agree with that. I think at this point for these 2026 wide receivers, Casey Concepcion has moved ahead of him, but he's still very much undervalued in the community. And I just hope that he goes to a really good offensive coordinator.
I almost took Concepcion here. Almost.
I think I would have, man. At this point, with where I am in my film study of these wide receivers for 2026, Concepcion has definitely moved past him, and he might even continue to rise, man. He's been getting some steam from others that I respect in the community. And the more I've dove in, I'm starting to like what I see. But it takes nothing away from Jeremy Bernard or his versatility. With the collapse of Ryan Williams, who, spoiler alert, he is not in these top 2 rounds. He really took over that the wide receiver room there at Bama. Definitely undervalued for sure. I don't hate the pick, but I think that there's some others that I would take, including who we took here to end the second round at 212, Jadan Baugh. Now, I was watching this as we were doing this mock, Chris. I was watching with bated breath, like, who's going to take Jadan Baugh, man? I was taking all the 2027 running backs. I took Ahmad Hardy, Kewan, Lacy. I wasn't going to take Jadan Baugh, and I wanted to see how far he would fall. And it's really disrespectful, I think, to let him fall this far. He's my running back 3 in the 2027 class. We've talked about how talented that running back class is looking. These top 3 guys are just incredible. 6'1", 231 pounds. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Leonard Fournette in a way with his body type. Almost 1,200 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns on a really bad Florida team. 767 yards rushing after contact. 66 missed tackles forced as a 231-pound freak nasty athlete. I've told you before, Chris, I get excited to watch this guy run the football. Jadan Baugh is so much fun.
Yeah,
and he's the best running back that nobody's really talking about, man. I feel like I have to hype this guy up continually. I wasn't sure if he was going to enter the transfer portal. It looks like he's staying there at Florida with the new coach, Summerall there. So we'll see what they do. If they develop the offense to funnel through him, I think that we could see his stock elevate potentially, barring any injuries or anything like that. Barring that he stays healthy, man, he's looking like another really, really good running back in this 2027 class.
Without a doubt, man. One of the things I love about you and I hosting this show together is that I feel like I get very into the game theory side of things where, you want to position yourself appropriately in the draft and you're trying to make the right pick and you're taking the best of the value that's presented to you and you're just all in on your guys. So you balance me out a little bit. And I think whenever you took Jadan Baugh, I was like, man, I probably should have taken him over Jeremy Bernard, over maybe even Jonah Coleman, because he's got such a high ceiling. And the more you talk about him, the more I love him. So at 212 here in this combined mock, love that pick for you.
Yeah, for sure. It's a steal. Well, Chris, we made it through the top 2 rounds. That is all for today. That's going to do it for this episode, everybody. If you enjoyed this breakdown, if you enjoyed this combined mock draft going head to head, 26 versus 27, make sure to like the video, drop a comment, and of course, subscribe to the channel. It helps us more than you probably realize. And if you want to keep the conversation going, join the free Devy Dojo Discord. It's going to be linked in the description of this video. That's where we're talking through these boards, trade ideas, class values all week, every day. We got a really active community. We've had a lot of people join recently, and the community is just continuing to grow, and I absolutely love it. And if you're looking for more written versions, some deeper dives, check out the free Devy Dojo Substack. Again, all those links are going to be below in the description of this video. I appreciate all you guys for watching. We'll be back in the next episode to finish this combined mock with rounds 3 and 4. We will see you next time at the dojo.